G'day, this is Brian Medway from Crosslink Christian Network in a little series here talking about combat ready and talking about weapons of war and talking about the way in which the enemy makes his presence known. And this all comes from Ephesians chapter 6 and those places, but it's actually the understanding of this is drawn from the whole of the New Testament, but especially the hundreds of stories that we have about the ministry of Jesus and the apostles, because if Paul is talking about weapons, then I want to know what those weapons looked like in the ministry of Jesus and get my understanding from there first of all, and then to talk about how it worked out in the time of the apostles. And we have record of all that. It's an inspired record, and so we need to get our record from there, not from somewhere else. And so these 7 weapons are, we've been talking about some of them. The first one is truth or reality, making reality known. The second one is righteousness, that is representing the heart motivation and attitude of God, attitude and motivation that comes from God, reflects God. The third one is the gospel of peace, or the gospel. The fourth one is faith. The fifth one is salvation. Sixth is what God has said, the word. And the seventh is prayer. Now, I'm just using a passage here from Luke chapter 5 about Jesus being in a house that was full of, largely of Pharisees and teachers of the law from every village in Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. It was a big gathering and Jesus was there. Think about it. He's gathered together with all the people who don't like him, all the people who are suspicious of him, all the people who kind of dog his footsteps all the way from, almost from the time of the Jordan to the time of the cross. So I don't know what you think about having people like that around. I don't know what you think about walking into a room full of people who don't like you, who think you're a nutcase, who think you're a dangerous heretic, all that kind of stuff. You probably have an attitude to overcome there, because there's a battle going on right there. And in the middle of, and so Jesus is just teaching away. We don't know what he was teaching about, but we know that he was in the middle of teaching when some bunch of friends tried to get their mate down through the roof and so forth. And there's a lot of funny things about that, and you've all heard sermons about them, but I'm wanting to understand from a story. This is an example. I've just chosen this one because I can just illustrate these different weapons of truth, righteousness, gospel, faith, salvation, word, and prayer. And and Paul says put on the full armour of God. And so I want to see that Jesus operated in the full armour of God. And so I've shown in a previous session that the truth he revealed was, he said to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, I've said forgiveness to this man so that you can know that I'm the Son of God. So that you can know that the Son of Man, that's me, I have power to forgive sins. And that is equal to God. And this is very profound, because he could have said, I'm the Messiah. But you see, the discovery of the Messiah is not something you just simply repeat the word and you discover it. You have to make the discovery. That's why Jesus didn't say, hey, by the way, Peter, do you believe I'm the Messiah? He said, who do you say that I am? And Peter said the Messiah, and Jesus said, I know what's happened. You've been listening to my Father. My Father has revealed this to you. You've had an encounter, and that encounter has said inside you, this is my Son, whom I'm well pleased. Well, the same thing, the same opportunity is given to these people on that occasion. And so Jesus reveals himself, not by saying, by the way, Messiah, do you know how to spell that? And I'm it. No. He's actually explaining to them in a different way, making known to them so that they can discover it for themselves. This is very, very important when it comes to gospel ministry. All we do we're midwives helping people give birth to discovering the truth. We're midwives in that process. We're not the people who make it happen. And so Jesus is this. We got this from Jesus. Otherwise, we're going to use our culture and we're going to manipulate and persuade. We're going to have 7 questions, and whether people answer yes or no, we're going to get a sale. So Jesus, he makes the truth known. Secondly, he reveals righteousness to them by loving them, by wanting them to be rescued, wanting them to come to an understanding. And now we're going to talk about the gospel. Now, did Jesus preach the gospel? Some people think that you can't have the gospel until after Calvary, but the gospel is the good news about Jesus and the kingdom. The good news of the kingdom, the good news of the gospel. It is the good news that Jesus came to proclaim. And by the way, in Mark's gospel it said, this is the beginning of the gospel. So everything that follows is the gospel. And so if this follows as well, this is Luke, then Jesus is preaching the gospel. So you're not going to say, did Jesus preach the gospel here? You're going to say, how did he preach the gospel? That is, how did he draw attention to the fact that he was the king? See, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom is proclaiming the king of the kingdom. You can't have the gospel of the kingdom without the king. You can't have the gospel as values. Are you going to become a better person today? No. Are you going to discover Jesus today? Discover that Jesus is the king. That's the gospel. And so Jesus showed his kingly rule by healing the sickness in the man, or the paralysis. But he also showed the gospel by giving these people an opportunity to come to know who he was. And so at the end of the thing it says they were all filled with awe. Something of the presence of God was there through what happened. It wasn't there before. It wasn't there the day before. It wasn't in the building. It was there because certain things were said and certain things were happening. And so, get rid of that. And so Jesus proclaims the gospel by, drawing attention to this thing. He could have said to the bloke, hey, listen, mate, I'm teaching right now. Just set aside, I'll talk to you later. No. He actually used, this is an amazing sense of the sovereignty of God. God sovereignly arranges this platform for Jesus to preach the gospel. And so that's why when the people start removing tiles from the roof, Jesus isn't saying, oi, get out of here, I'm teaching. Can't you see? That would be a common response from us. But Jesus is a gospel person. And so when he sees this thing happening, this is gospel opportunity. This is the opportunity to preach the gospel not only to the people who exercise faith by bringing their friend, not only to the man who needs to be healed, but so the gospel is redemption, liberation, freedom from oppression, freedom from guilt, freedom, truth, transformation. And so you've got to say, how did the gospel get preached? Well, the guys up the top got the gospel because their faith was rewarded. The guy on the ground got the gospel because he was healed. He was delivered from what was oppressing him. The Pharisees and the Sadducees had the opportunity to see that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus gave them that opportunity. Now that is the gospel. It is the gospel of peace. Peace inside, peace with God, peace. It's not like peace that is no. Peace is like it's shalom. It's every form of blessedness coming into being. Everything that is good, everything that is wholesome, everything that produces fruitfulness and glory and grace from heaven, everything that makes known the purposes of God, this is peace. Shalom. This is it. Now this holistic, wonderful thing. And so it's the gospel of this holism. That's the gospel. So everybody got the gospel. And it says at the end of the day, they were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today. Now, I don't know who we were. It's easy to assume it was the crowd and not the Pharisees. But just think if it was the Pharisees and Sadducees. They didn't say, wow, Jesus healed the Messiah. Not openly anyway. We know later on a lot of priests and teachers of the law came to the faith. So maybe their journey began here. And all I'm saying is they saw something. They walked away that day with something inside of them which said to them, this man is the Messiah. That's the gospel. And the enemy has no power to overcome that.